welcome to the second episode of How to Cyberpunk. In today's episode, we're gonna take a look on how to turn a car into a futuristic cyberpunkish vehicle. Or if you're not into this futuristic style, we can just call it digital tuning. All steps can be done inside of Photoshop, but if you have any further knowledge of 3D software such as Blender or 3ds Max, that would be a huge benefit. So here we are in Photoshop. Obviously the first thing you need is a picture of your car. I took mine about 2 years ago with a basic smartphone, so nothing too fancy here. One thing to keep in mind though, if you already know what kind of style or what kind of tuning you want to go for, then do a little bit of research. If you have the perfect reference image, like for example this one, then try to match the perspective of the original shot as close as somehow possible, since this will make your life a lot easier in the later steps, especially if you are not planning to use any 3D software. So how do we start this process? If you know 100% for sure that you want to keep the background that you have for the final image, but replace the sky, then you can easily go up here to edit and go to sky replacement. This will change the sky within seconds. I already made another video about it, link somewhere here. But I personally like to have complete control over the creative process and about all the steps. So therefore, I go the tedious long way and start masking all the areas that I need, like foreground, middle ground, background, and the car itself. After you're done with that step, you should have something like this. I have my car here in the foreground, then I have the ground separated, I have the background left and right separated, and in my case I had the stage here, and as you see now, we have sky and we have all the elements by themselves. At that point, you're almost done with the masking. The only thing you have to do from here on is to mask out all the areas that are like painted if you want to switch the color of your car later on. So therefore, one more time, masking, but then we are done. At this point, you can already start changing the color of your car to any of your need. Just put this layer on the top, activate everything again, and with a little help of some adjustment layers, such as, for example, hue and saturation, which you only want to apply to the below layer, you can do this by keeping Alt pressed, and then you see this little icon here. You can start changing the color of your car. But we come back to that later on. For now, the next step will be to replace background, and especially the sky. Unlike in the last video, I'm gonna try to create the whole sky now from scratch. We make a new layer, put it below our main object since we want to have it in the background, and just fill this one with black for the moment. As you see, we have a black sky now. Next step would be to add a little bit of a gradient over it with colors. I mean, that's completely up to you, but I like to go within the Cyberpunk color plate, which is something like this maybe. Then go here to gradient and boom. Looks completely odd right now, I know, but that'll change in a couple of seconds. With the opacity, you can see you can adjust those values a little bit, but for now that should be okay. The next thing we want to add is the face that gives the whole picture a little bit more depth and dynamic. As I said before in the first video, if you didn't see that yet, go and check it out. To do so, many of you know already, I like to use brushes from Brush Easy. And here I have this DD space field brushes brush. This will add the space field afterwards, but we're gonna start off with haze brushes, therefore I use a fog brush. By using the photo filters mask tools, you can also colorize the haze on the background a little bit different on the right and left side, or depending on your picture on the top or bottom side. This also adds a little bit more of dynamic. Also, you should match the sky now and start putting everything a little bit together and add all those elements a little bit more towards the style of your background on your skies. To do so, you go to your main objects again and start adding these layers, adjustment layers, such as hue and saturation, exposure, curves, and whatever else might help. Once you start to be satisfied with the result, it is also a great addition to put all your background layers, like the sky layers, into a separate group, named sky. And now you can even add adjustment layers on top of it that will affect the whole group. Now we finally hit the stage where the real fun begins. We start adding models, parts, wires, cables, body modifications to our car. To start off this process, I wanted to change all the metal parts. Well, I wanted to add metal to the plastic parts, since I don't like plastic in general and I think this car has way too much plastic parts. This is a fairly easy process. You just import a metal texture like this one. You can easily find tons of them just using a Google search for metal textures. And you bring them roughly where you want them. In my case, it's here. You decrease the opacity and then you use a warp modifier to bring it in shape. After you brought it in shape, easily switch its blending mode to hard light or overlay. This is a little bit, again, personal preference. And mask out the areas where it has to be. Always keep in mind that you can use, and you should use, as many adjustment layers as you need until you are satisfied with what you have. In my case here, I try to tweak it a little bit more with some further adjustment layers like exposure and hue and saturation to get this metallic look. To make it pop out even more, you can also add some little screws like this one. I found this one also somewhere on Google. You just mask it out and add it to the points where you want it, bring it into perspective, and use adjustment layers again to match it with the rest of the shape. You repeat this process with all the plastics on your car until you are satisfied. Now we can finally start with the body modifications. Like I said earlier, it's a huge benefit if you have any knowledge in 3D, especially since they have web pages such as Blender's Web or TurboSquid. There's a lot of free 3D models that you can get access to. And with just the very basic knowledge of rendering and modeling, you can achieve a great result in a much faster time without having to worry about perspective matching and warping and all of that. I will make sure to make a little tutorial on that. The link will be up there somewhere once it's uploaded to guide you through that. But for now, we want to stick with Photoshop, and let's see how we can achieve the same or almost the same results as if we would be using 3D software. Now you will realize how important it was to match the perspective of your shot with the one of your previously picked out footage, since matching can be quite hard. On the other hand, there's tons of pictures of tuned cars out there. And there's also another way that I want to show you. I did show that process in my first video already, but here we go again. You just open a website called Sketchfab and type in whatever kind of model you're looking for. In my case, I did look up tuned car. Then you click on downloadable, and then you see some of those models have a little downloadable icon up here, and some have a dollar icon up here. Make sure to only use the ones that have this downloadable icon. If you want to use any of the other ones, be fair and buy them. And then you just click one. Let's say this one here. This actually matches exactly what we need. Then there will be a 3D model uploading. And there you see it. You can move it with your mouse completely 360 degrees. You try to match the perspective of your shot. And for example, I want to have this part up here in the front. You try to match it as close as possible, and you easily use the snipping tool, which comes naturally with Windows. You click on New, and there you go. You can just cut out some pieces. You save them. You bring them into Photoshop, and from there on, you just repeat this process with all the pieces that you want to have. Like I said, you can also use photo references, since they might look a little bit more realistic. After some additional tweaking and adding more details, you should have something like this. As you can see, I tweaked the position of the motor block again, added those little details, colored the windows black, added those shark rib tail things. Also, I cut a little bit of the chassis open so you can see the below laying engine parts. Also a very easy process. All you have to do is add another 3D model, use adjustment layers to get them really dark and mask out the areas to create the effect as if it would be underneath this part, and then just shadow darkening those areas here so it has a little bit of the effect as it would be on the inside. Oh yeah, and I changed the color obviously also, so with that blackish one for now. Maybe I'll change that a little bit later, but for now that should be fine. And in the next steps we're gonna add some lights. So in order to give that whole thing a little bit more light, we want to start off by adding some effects and lights to the front and headlights of the car. There's actually two ways I think that are doable. One is using the actual one you have and just giving a little bit of a color. I'll show that in a minute. And the other one is to add additional light footage and lights from images we find online. For example, I found this one here that I did like a lot, and let's see how we can put that into the front. Obviously, we start off with masking, since this is what we always do, and then we just have to put it in place. Just place it roughly where you want it and add some more adjustment layers to control the colors and the intensity of it. Also, you can manipulate the layer style and you can ultimately add a little bit of glow effect to it. Last step for this process is just to add something I would call light overblow. Which would be the emission of the light on the surfaces around it. It's also an easy process. Just create a new layer below your light. Take a white color, make it big enough and add it in. And then it's also just adjustment layers, and don't forget to put the layer blending mode to color dodge. So as you see, this is one way of doing it. We intensify this effect later on by adding some lens flares. But basically the same thing we just did with the overblow effect is how you can achieve the same thing for this one. Like if you don't want to add additional lights, but use yours instead, just duplicate them, add a couple of adjustment layers and tweak them. Also keep in mind that you should always use the mask layers that come naturally whenever you create an adjustment layer, and sometimes it's also a good tip to invert them and then just paint in the areas where you want it, as you just saw me doing it with the darker areas of the front light. Also keep in mind we are working in a non-destructive workflow here. That means you can change anything at any time. For example, if I would not be satisfied with the color at the moment, I just go to that photo filter layer and switch it from orange to blue or whatever other color I like, depending on the main overall color of your car or your composition, the whole image.
Once you're done, you should have something like this. I added all those lights here, and in addition I also added a light behind this grill here and behind this grill, and also down here. This is highly dependent on the vehicle you're going for, and you may even want to change the whole grill in an earlier step. So I don't want to go over this too much. It's basically exactly the same as the process for everything else we did. But what I want to show you instead is the lens flares, because we definitely need those lights to pop out more. So how do we do that? We add some lens flares. You can find a lot of them again online, but I also put a link down in the description with a basic pack that you can use as a starting point. So you are just doing the following. You insert your lens flare. I take this one for right now. Then you place it roughly where you would expect it. And also adjustment layers help. Just for example, hue and saturation or the photo filter, both can help in this case. And with that one, you can just change the color, super easy and fast. In my case, something like this. And there you have a lens flare. Just make sure not to overdo it, otherwise it might look a little bit too much. Another thing that I really like to add is light overblows. I'll demonstrate that here with the engine. Let's pretend there would be a light inside the engine and we would see it coming out. It would shoot a little halo and haze around here in the air. To achieve this, we use another brush from Brush Easy. It's basically the same ones as we had before, like this haze brush from the beginning. We add it on top of this, add photo filter layer and mask it out a little bit to give that impression and illusion of light coming from down of the engine area. By the way, if you want, you can use exactly the same technique to give a little bit of a neon light on the bottom part. So, as you can see, by adding those light blow effects, the lighting of the car pops out way more, and even though we didn't use any post-processing filters or layers, or we are still far away from the camera raw filter, it starts already to look very dynamic and, yeah, evil. So another thing I really like to do, I know it's not 100% realistic, but as you can tell, nothing of it is 100% realistic, but it adds a lot to the overall image. You wanna go into the brush settings and take a normal brush, turn its size down pretty much all the way to 5 or 6, depending on your image size, maybe 10 or 12. Then you go to the brush settings, you click this little button here that says Shape Dynamics. And in that panel, you wanna go to Control and then Pen Pressure. And what is happening now is that you can create highlight lines. They might look pretty unspectacular at that point, but later on, when you apply the camera raw filter, they really do pop out. So what you do is you use the pen tool, and then you just try to find sharp edges that could be lit by light, or even dark areas. It just doesn't matter. It's just about getting a little bit of an extra detail into it. I'll just show this up front here. You just have to find hard edges. That's the most important thing, because those lines would not occur on a flat surface. Once you created this line, you just right click and go on Stroke Path with Pen Pressure Simulation on, and that gives you this kind of line. This is a nice little detail that really makes everything pop out a little bit more. Keep doing this process even on the little parts, and just go until you're absolutely happy with it. And then we start going to the advanced effects and start adding post-production and all those things that make the whole thing shine even more. As you see, this doesn't make a huge difference if I turn this layer on and off. But if you look at those areas and this here and down there, it is subtle, but it makes a difference. And later on, once we hit the post stage, you will see it actually does make a big difference. So now, next step, we're gonna add a little bit of drama to this whole thing. We do this by adding a little bit of haze and fog and details, like hazy effects behind and next to the car. This also helps to separate a little bit from the background. Process is the same as always. The haze brush, but the only thing we have to be aware of is that we put the new layer behind the car and in between the car and the background. I don't think I have to mention it again, but also keep in mind to use masks and some soft brushes to reduce sharp edges, since we don't want to have any sharpness, like sharp edges and corners. And also use additional adjustment layers to control the density and the color of the fog. At this stage, I like to add my first couple of adjustment layers post-wise. That means it's not really an adjustment layer in the forms of adjustment layers as we saw them before, but it is based on actual images. I usually go with the same ones all the time. I start with a light leak. They are all light leaks. You can find tons of them online. I usually start with a cold one, meaning bluish and whitish bluish colors. Then put that down to screen and turn down the opacity until I start liking it. My second one is a vignette, basically also set on overlay. The normal one would be like this. So again, overlay and opacity down a little bit. And lastly, I have a warm light leak. Put on soft light. If you look at the normal picture, it's basically the same as we had before with blue, but this time with warm tones. And here you have to turn it down pretty much all the way, since this effect would be too strong. But this is a personal preference, as almost everything that we do here. So I'll keep mine at 10, and that should be okay for the moment. At this stage, we can also start tweaking the things we already have. For example, I thought my ground was way too bright compared to the car itself. Right now it looks like a little bit it's sticked onto the picture, even though it is actually part of the original picture. So I just add a little adjustment layer, an exposure adjustment layer on top of my ground layer. There you see the benefits of having everything separate. And then just take the exposure down until I'm happy with it. And I even add a second one with a darker value to mask this out around the car, so it looks like the shadow underneath the car is a little bit more dominant. At this point, I also realized it would be cool to have a little bit more motion in the picture. And to achieve that, I added a little bit of a radial blur to the back tire and a little bit of overall blur on the whole car. And just mask it so it looks like it's coming from the side and has a little bit more of a speed, kind of long exposure effect. Before you start with the last steps, be sure that you are happy and satisfied with your current result. and add a little details and fix little some things wherever you like. I, for example, added some water splashes here, a little display here on the side, changed the left side of the background a little bit, and also tweaked the colors of faces of the background and the overall image a little bit. But once you are at that stage, what you should totally do is take everything you have and put it in a new folder. Simply call this comp, for example. Then you duplicate this, you right click it and you say merge group. This gives you a single image of everything that is inside of it. And now to create this wet floor look, all we have to do is we go to edit, to transform, flip it vertical. I know this is absolutely not physically correct what I'm doing here, but it's just about the visuals, so it should be okay. We roughly bring it somewhere where we like it. We can actually even go a little higher. This. Then you change the blending mode to soft light. And you add an inverted mask, so it disappears again. And now all you have to do is take a normal soft brush, turn down the flow a little bit, and just paint in the areas that you feel like could have some wet spots. And as you see, this instantly creates this effect and this illusion of a reflection, which usually happens when the floor is wet. After that, we are applying our famous camera raw filter, meaning we take both layers again, well, the group and the new layer. We duplicate this with Ctrl J and we merge it down to one layer. Then we go to filter, camera raw filter, and here we go. As I said in the previous video, there are no perfect values for this. This highly depends on your image. What I like to do, usually I like to change those basic values, and I also like to go to add to effects and add a little bit of grain and vignette to it. But there's tons and tons of options. You should really go and try it out for yourself. I fast forward my process here and then afterwards show you the huge impact it has by just comparing various versions of this. So while I keep talking, you see the different results with different settings of the camera raw filter. I think this gives you a great overview on how powerful this filter actually is. And it's always a great moment at the end of your work when you come to this stage and you see everything blending together. I hope you learned a little something from this tutorial and that you liked it. Give me some feedback in the comments below. Send me your artwork if you did your own car. And make sure to hit that subscribe button. Follow me on Instagram or whatever. All links down there in the description, and I hope I see you in the next video. Cheers and Greez out.